The Mueller report is coming out. Does the president have anything to be afraid of? I don't think so. Joining us now, Sidney Powell, former federal prosecutor, one of America's great lawyers, and best-selling author of License to Lie, Exposing Corruption at the Department of Justice. Sidney, we could talk about corruption at the Department of Justice from now until the year 2036. Welcome.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. I wrote a 450-page book about it.
We could sit here, never move, and keep talking until we both died of old age. Before we get into that, we have so many things to talk about. I want to get into that. We have so many things I want to talk to you about. Oh, guys, don't listen. You stay tuned, all of us. So many things to talk to Sidney about. All right, the Mueller report, first up, coming out in a few days. What do we think? My guess is we already saw his conclusion. He said there was no collusion as we expected. I don't think the president has anything to fear. The only thing I think the president might have to fear is perhaps something from Cy Vance from the DA in New York City. But other than that, I think the president's home free. What do you think?
In terms of any charges, yes, but there's going to be a lot of junk in there. I'm expecting a very carefully crafted narrative done by Mr. Weissman in which he pieces together parts of different things that don't fit, but writes the story he wants to write to try to smear Mr. Trump with things that he thinks come close to collusion.
All right, let me ask you this now. For those of us who don't know, the Attorney General, William Barr, what is his decisional attitude to not release more of this? What must he do legally? What should he do? What's Barr thinking of right now?
Well, he has already gone through a very careful process with Mr. Mueller and probably some members of his team as well, and with Mr. Rosenstein, who supervised the whole investigation, to redact things that have to be legally redacted, such as grand jury testimony, information that would identify people who were merely witnesses that should not be identified to the public for all kinds of reasons. They don't want to be harassed. They were promised grand jury secrecy because grand jury proceedings are secret, and to protect their reputations and lives, and information that is classified and can't be disclosed because of also ongoing investigations. So those are the four basic categories.
What are the legal, but that's broad. Those categories you outlined, those legal categories are broad. It would seem to me that, I mean, maybe this is just a media perception game. Barr, pretty much under the statute, can withhold as much as he wants. Is that accurate?
No, not really. I mean, those aren't as broad as you might think they are.
So, in other words, he's got to release to the public. He's got to release this. He's under certain statutory duty to release some of this to the public. Is that accurate?
Yes. Well, he said he would, and the president wants him to. And he has said from the very beginning he wants to be as transparent as possible. And he's told Congress that he's even willing to work with them. If they think certain additional things should be unredacted, he will try to work with them to do that.
What do you think? Now, let's talk about this narrative that Mr. Weissman, oh, my God, but this narrative he may spin up. What may be in this narrative?
Well, we can look at the indictments of Roger Stone, for example, and the Concord case involving the Russian troll farms and the 13 people from Russia, where they were trying to say that they did all these Facebook ads and that kind of thing and make it sound a lot worse than it was. They'll take things like that and the plea agreement statements that they did for different people and tell a big story that really doesn't amount to a hill of beans because no charges came from those stories.
Okay, so now would there be what can he keep out, the Weissman narrative? I mean, how would that even be relevant? In other words, if you're the Attorney General, they're reporting on Russian collusion, they have things that are extraneous in there. Why does that have to be released? If it's not even related to the core question, why would he have to release that to the public?
Well, I don't think he would absolutely have to, but if it's in the Mueller report and he has promised transparency, my guess is he's going to release it.
Well, that's like saying, though, I guess the question is, what if Mueller starts writing about Notre Dame football? Do you have to release that too? I mean, it would seem to me that he had a specific charge, and that's what counts. But as you say, maybe it's not a legal question. It's just an issue of just what he said with transparency.
Right. I think that's going to boil down to a lot of it. And, of course, we know from the Concord indictment that there were a lot of assertions about the Russian troll farms, but most of that indictment actually came from an article in a Russian magazine. I talk about that in my article at my website, SidneyPowell.com, that came out today.
Let me ask you this now, Sidney. The 12 people that Mueller indicted that supposedly are over there and Putin is hiding in Russia, are those people real? Do we have any reason? Could this be fake like most of the rest of Mueller's world? Do we even know that these people exist?
A lot of it could be fake, and we know it didn't amount to a hill of beans. I think they only spent $100,000 or something on Facebook ads, which is next to nothing.
Hey, let me ask you this. Here's this question a lot of on Facebook and on the radio show. Everybody asks this question. Take us inside, and you're as expert in this as anyone. Take us inside the twisted mind of Robert Mueller. Okay, so he got this 2 years ago. Did he probably believe it? Did he not believe it? Did he know a year ago there wasn't going to be anything and he just wanted to stay in the national spotlight? Take us inside Mueller's mind. What's he really thinking about during the day? Take us through a walk in his mind.
He had to have known there was no collusion because Mr. Weissman, his right-hand man, was working in the Department of Justice behind the scenes with Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr and Christopher Steele running the back channel on the phony Steele dossier between the DOJ and the FBI for months before the special counsel was even formed.
What was Mr. Weissman? I don't know this, and maybe our viewers don't know this. What was Mr. Weissman? Just for those of you who don't know, first of all, that's Mueller. Weissman is Mueller's number 2 in the special counsel's office, or at least it was when it existed. What was Weissman immediately prior to that?
Weissman was head of the fraud section in the Department of Justice, which had nothing to do with any of this. Bruce Orr was number 4 in DOJ. In the grand scheme of things, Bruce Orr would have never talked to Andrew Weissman about any of this, but obviously Weissman was part of the small group that was trying to put all this together, as was Ms. Ahmad, who also wound up on Mr. Mueller's squad and was part of the back channel with Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr and the Steele dossier.
Where did Mueller come from? I've heard a number of rumors that Father Bush father and son, were involved in doing this to screw Trump. Any truth to that?
That I don't know, but Mueller has been part of the elite ruling class for a long time and has a questionable history of prosecutorial misconduct himself going back to Boston. He and Andrew Weissman go back together at least 20 years. Mueller has been protecting and promoting Weissman despite Weissman's egregious. Oh,
so they have a history. They have it. So Mueller, Mueller knew Weissman very well when he put him on the team.
Oh, yes. Mueller had a hand in picking Weissman for the Enron task force, which I documented thoroughly in my book, License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, which I published in 2014. And it is a scathing indictment of Mr. Weissman's egregious prosecutorial misconduct for several years in Enron-related litigation, where they ran roughshod over the rights of most of Houston.
Now, let's wrap Rod. All right, now, the granddaddy of them all is our friend Rod Rosenstein, who might be the most corrupt judicial figure, justice figure in American history. How does he wrap into this? How did Trump get Rosenstein in the first place? How did he interject himself into this? Fill me in on all this.
I think he came to Trump by way of Sessions. Sessions wanted somebody who, quote, knew the building, end quote, and Rosenstein had been the U.S. attorney in Baltimore, where notably he and Weissman worked together on one of the little Uranium One related cases where they worked out a very quiet plea deal
that they fixed yes. For HRC.
Exactly.
Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. So now, what is Rosenstein doing right now? Are Rosenstein and Barr, I would presume, are in conflict? Rosenstein's probably trying to get as much of this out as he can to hurt the president. Is that what's going on?
No, I don't think they're in conflict. I would imagine that Mr. Rosenstein has a full understanding of who the Attorney General is. He agreed to stay and help get this done, since he's the one who made this ungodly mess in the first place. If he'd been man enough to handle it, we'd never had a special counsel.
Let me ask you this. Why hasn't Trump removed Rosenstein? Why is he? What's going on that he's there? I can't figure this.
Well, now that Barr's there, it's just a matter of time before Rosenstein leaves. I think as soon as all this is wrapped up, he'll be gone. And, of course, we're still waiting for the confirmation of Mr. Barr's choice as Deputy Attorney General, Jeff Rosen.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is I heard that 6 months ago. I've been hearing Rosenstein's leaving and leaving. He stays. He seems to be like
Barr asked him to stay.
Barr asked him, all right. He strikes me as
he
like...
asked him to stay to help finish this debacle.
He's like the cockroach after the atomic blast. All right, in the time remaining...
I think that was a brilliant move. I think that was absolutely brilliant on Barr's part. I don't think I could have stomached it, but it was brilliant on Barr's part.
All right, I'll be with you there. All right, license to lie, exposing corruption in the Justice Department. In time remaining... Give me a good story about justice, about DOJ corruption. Our viewers love this.
Well, in the book, I was actually working on the Arthur Anderson and later the Merrill Lynch cases. I identified this corrupt cabal of prosecutors who started as just terrorist prosecutors on the Enron task force. And then I watched as they all rose to great positions of power in the Obama administration. And I was flabbergasted because they all broke all the rules of prosecutorial conduct, literally all of them. So Catherine Rumler became Obama's chief White House counsel. Matthew Friedrich became acting assistant attorney general in charge of the criminal division of the Department of Justice under Bush, who then destroyed United States Senator Ted Stevens, the longest-serving Republican in the United States Senate, in a corrupted prosecution that later had to be thrown out, but not until he'd lost his Senate seat and changed the balance of power in the Senate and enabled the enactment of Obamacare. And then Weissman became Mueller's deputy director, general counsel of the FBI. Leslie Caldwell became Loretta Lynch's head of the criminal division of the Department of Justice, and Lisa Monaco became Obama's counterterrorism advisor. Those were all 5 Enron task force prosecutors, and there are more that rose to power elsewhere too, all of whom destroyed Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs, only to be reversed by the Supreme Court 9-0 3 years later because what they charged wasn't a crime, and destroyed 4 Merrill Lynch executives, sent them to prison for up to a year while they hid the evidence that showed they were innocent. And they literally created a crime there and wrote an indictment that convinced a federal district judge and a court of appeals not to even let him out on bail pending appeal, but all on all alleging conduct that wasn't even criminal. But they made it sound so bad, they got by with it for over a year.
Sidney Powell, I have a feeling you and I could talk forever. Fascinating, enlightening. Wish we had more time. Sidney Powell, ladies and gentlemen, former federal prosecutor, best-selling author of License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Justice Department. If we're real lucky, Sidney, we'll be able to have you back again.
Yeah, read the book. It reads like a Grisham novel. It's all true, and it names names.
Get License to Lie. Thank you. Julian Assange. Will the U.S. or the U.K. government kill him in custody? You already have the foundation for that. They say they're talking about him taking drugs. My thinking is that may be the precursor to another story. Will they say, well, he happened to OD in prison? Yes, folks, our government does kill people, and the U.K. is far worse. Boy, the English sure have a violent history. Joining us now, Dr. Jerome Corsi, one of my favorites, author of Silent No More, How I Became a Political Prisoner of Mueller's Witch Hunt. Dr. Jerome Corsi is an accomplished academic. He's a political scientist. He's a great historian. Jerry, it's a pleasure to have you.
Jack, it's great to be back with you. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Well, there's so much I'd like to talk to you about, Jerry. I hardly know where to start. Let's start with Assange because he's the what do we know about this? So their extradition. He's fighting extradition. His lawyer over there, I forget her name, the woman. She's from Australia. She's in London now. They're fighting extradition. What do you know about Assange? What's happening?
Well, first of all, the important thing to realize is this is not an indictment. Assange was not indicted for anything to do with Russia or the theft of the Democratic National Committee emails. Nothing to do with any of that.
Because the statute has run. The statute of limitations has run on those particular issues.
No, I'm not sure why they didn't. I don't think the government has proof on any of these issues. I think it's really they've indicted him over the 2010 issue that had to do with the theft of these emails by Chelsea Manning. and giving them to, these were when Chelsea Manning was, a soldier, had stolen all these classified government documents and gotten them over to Assange, who published them in WikiLeaks. Now, in 2013, the Obama Department of Justice had declined to prosecute Assange over the Chelsea Manning leaks because of First Amendment issues. The Obama Department of Justice decided that the case, New York Times v. U.S., the Pentagon Papers case, applied to Assange, even though he's not a U.S. citizen, such that if Assange were prosecuted, it would be hard to figure out why they didn't also prosecute the New York Times and the Washington Post and a host of other newspapers, all of whom published Chelsea Manning's disclosures.
The question becomes, what's a journalistic entity and what did the court mean? I guess a lot of that's undefined.
Well, and see, I maintain that under this indictment, first of all, the point I want to make is this indictment is a very, very weak indictment, because the indictment specifies that Assange volunteered to help Chelsea Manning break a password to steal these documents, but the indictment makes it clear that Assange did not succeed in cracking the password. So all of the documents that were published by WikiLeaks on Chelsea Manning in 2010 and afterwards were done without the assistance of Assange to steal those documents. And that's important because under the Pentagon Papers ruling, the Supreme Court case in 1971, the newspapers or journalist has the right to publish classified stolen documents about national security issues as long as the journalist did not participate in stealing the documents. Chelsea Manning went to prison in 1971. Daniel Ellsberg, who stole the Pentagon Papers, went to prison, but the Supreme Court allowed a 6-3 decision, the New York Times and the Washington Post, to publish the Pentagon Papers, even though they were very embarrassing to national security, because they demonstrated that early on in the Vietnam War, the first months, Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, and Lyndon Johnson knew the war was not winnable, but they lied to the American people. And ultimately, 50,000 Americans lost their lives in that war. And it was a disgrace that our federal government made such a
so it seems like
mockery.
You lay it out so well, Jerry. It seems like it's a very weak case. So in other words, if that's the only count, so it's a one-count indictment. Weak. It's an exceedingly weak indictment. If I were the Justice Department, he's going to get a sort of celebrity lawyer. I'm hearing Dershowitz will do it. Would you really even want this case? I mean, this sounds almost crazy. You're not charging Manning. In other words, then the question the judge will say, why aren't you charging the thief and you're charging the recipient? None of it makes a lot of sense.
Well, Manning was charged and he went to prison. And Obama actually commuted his sentence and let him out of prison.
Him or her? I guess we don't know what Manning is. I don't know what to call Manning.
Today it's her.
It's a her. Okay, it's a her. It is. I don't know what. It's a her. Okay, so
today we call her she.
Okay, so Obama. Okay, so she was charged. I didn't realize that.
Yes, and convicted.
And convicted. So now they're. But it seems like, why would you want? So then there's a big hearing. In this case, there has to be a big hearing on the Pentagon Papers question before the case can even proceed. That will likely go up to the Supreme Court. If this is the only count, how are you going to hold this guy? If I'm a judge, this is a pickle because you'll want to hold Assange. I don't know why, but I'm presuming a federal judge would want to. And if all you have is this, you don't have any grounds to hold them.
Well, see, and you hear various Lindsey Graham gives a statement about how reprehensible it is to steal government secrets. Well, Assange did not, I don't think, steal the Chelsea Manning secrets. He did not steal the DNC emails. And, of course, the people like Daniel Ellsberg, who did steal the Pentagon Papers, Chelsea Manning, were prosecuted. It's a crime to steal government secrets, classified documents. But from the public interest of journalism, it's questionable under the First Amendment. The government has really the right to maintain secrets. And governments with using secrets powers have typically fought wars that are illegal and done all kinds of things that are reprehensible under the cloak of government secrecy because they don't want the public to know. Now, another point I want to make is I think Assange has got to get out of free a gold card, because Assange has maintained repeatedly that Russia did not steal the Democratic National Committee emails, and Russia played no part in getting those emails to Assange to publish in WikiLeaks. Now, if that's the case, I don't see why Attorney General Barr doesn't give immunity to Assange to testify.
And find out who did.
Find out who did. If you can prove that, Assange, prove it. And, it will be a double whammy. First, now we have Mueller's final report, which says no collusion, and then we have Julian Assange, who comes forward and says, I can even prove that the Russians had nothing to do with stealing the email.
All right, Jerry, let me ask you this. Why don't they just, if the government is so interested in Assange, why don't they just charge him with the hacking? In other words, because there's not enough evidence for the hacking? Is that why they don't?
He didn't do the hacking.
He didn't do the hacking.
In the Chelsea Manning case, Assange never helped. He never succeeded in cracking the password.
All right, now this brings us back. As you may have known, I investigated the murder of Seth Rich for 2 years. There's a lot of people who believe firmly that Seth was the leaker. I don't really have information one way or another. This brings us back to our friend Seth Rich. Is that where we bring Seth into this story?
Well, Assange has repeatedly, he gave an interview in July 22nd, 2016. He dropped 40,000 emails on Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Almost immediately, he gave an interview to British television, and he said the same things to Sean Hannity, in which he said the Russians did not help him steal the emails. Russia was not involved, and he hinted very strongly that Seth Rich was this Democratic National Committee employee, an IT specialist, who was murdered during the 2016 campaign in Washington, D.C., in a murder that has never been solved. Assange has suggested that Julian Assange, that his source was Seth Rich. Now, I think, and I don't know, just like you, I don't know if Seth Rich stole the emails or not, but I think the fact that Julian Assange asserts, A, Russia did not steal the emails, and B, the culprit was Seth Rich, the Seth Rich case ought to be reopened.
It's a funny thing. We sent a open letter to Mueller asking him to go into Seth Rich. Shortly after that and this, if you remember, Mueller indicted those 12 Russians for allegedly. Now, we don't know if these 12 Russians, if any of them all even exist. But Mueller, first of all, it's silly because he knows they could never be brought back. There's no evidence whatsoever that any of the 12 even exist. Don't you find that timing a little bit uncanny?
Well,
Isn't that uncanny?
I do, and there's never any coincidences. I mean, the importance of my book, Silent No More, was that after 40 hours of questioning and after all of the pressure Mueller put me under, I would not lie to stay out of prison to give Mueller the link he wanted between Roger Stone and Julian Assange, because I don't know Assange. I've never met Assange.
Help our viewers now in the 2 minutes. So fascinating, Jerry. I know the story. Our viewers don't. Tell us exactly what Mueller wanted you to lie about. Tell our viewers.
Mueller wanted me to say that I was the one who connected Roger Stone to Julian Assange, and that would have connected Donald Trump through Roger Stone, and they could have told Assange how to drop the emails. And the reason that Mueller was so convinced I had to know Julian Assange was that in July and August 2016, at my 25th wedding anniversary,
congratulations,
wife and I and family, we were in Italy, and I figured out on my own that Assange had Podesta's emails, and he was going to use them that month later in October.
I see.
And I figured it out so precisely. And, of course, the FBI was monitoring. I didn't know it, but was monitoring my phone calls and my emails. I told Roger Stone that this was the case. I told others. And so the FBI and Mueller became absolutely convinced I could not have known in July and August 2016 that Assange had Podesta's emails and he was going to drop them in October, what they contained, how devastating they would be. I knew it so well. They just wouldn't believe that I figured it out on my own or guessed it.
I get it.
And because I wouldn't lie, I wouldn't, after 30 hours of intense questioning, cross-examination, making me go over all the facts 6-7 times, proving my memory was wrong. Tab 38 of this 8-inch thick book we have here with your name on it says that you wrote an email 2 years ago that contradicts what you just said. But I went in to cooperate. I gave them my cell phones, all my computers, the external hard drive backups. I authorized them to go into my email accounts. I did everything. And yet at the same time, Mueller would just not couldn't accept that I didn't know Julian Assange. And they were saying that if I didn't plead guilty to this one count of my first day's testimony that they had allowed me to amend when I forgot some emails, they were going to send me to prison. They were going to indict me of multiple counts in Washington, D.C. for a jury that hated me, and they were going to get a sentence of 25 years. And Jerry, it's going to cost me $2 million to defend myself.
Jerry, I thought we won the war against Hitler. I thought we won World War II, but I now understand that Normandy was a defeat. Our forces must have been turned back. I think the Fuhrer won the war.
You've got to read Silent No More. It's frightening. I wrote it when I thought I was going to go to prison.
This is Jerry Corsi, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Give my best to your fine wife and your fine lawyer, Larry Klayman. You are an American hero in every sense of the word. Jerry Corsi, author of Silent No More, How I Became a Political Prisoner of Mueller's Witch Hunt. You got to get it. Know this. Jerry Corsi stared down the biggest, baddest lion in the jungle. He stared him down. You didn't cave in. You held your ground, and good things happen to good people. Jerry, thank you. Is Donald Trump letting his supporters down? Is that what's happening? That's coming up in a minute. But first, we plunge into your questions. It's that time of the week. Alan in Montana. We've had Alan before. How can lefties keep claiming there was no spying on the Trump campaign when there so obviously was? The media has the audacity to say electronic surveillance isn't spying. They sound like complete government cronies. Is this the last nail in the coffin? Well, I'll tell you what, not only was there spying on the Trump campaign, the FBI, there's a trail of payments where the FBI tried to defraud the president. The FBI engaged to get 2 FISA warrants with supported by completely fake information. And those are the only 2 FISA warrants we are aware of. There could be a dozen more that we are not aware of. Alan in Montana, you are so right. Now, I need all of you. Go to BehindTheCurtain.com, get the podcast. More importantly, jump into the ring and square off. You need to participate in these square offs. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell. We got to get that podcast into your hands, all of you, each and every one of you. Dan in Tulsa. We've had Dan before, too. We like our repeat callers. Dan writes, if the socialists in Congress think that millionaires should be paying more in taxes, why don't they do it themselves? Bernie's tax returns show that he's firmly in the incorrupt group he loves to attack. Well, they're called limousine liberals. You ever hear that term? Oh, God, that goes back to the days of Nelson Rockefeller and before. In fact, that's about 100 years old. There's a long history of that. How about Nancy Pelosi? She came from wealth. She married wealth. You don't see her giving her money away. And how about our friends, the Kennedys? Why don't they give away all they have to the poor? Just give it all away. And then, of course, as you point out, Bernie. Bernie has a multi-million-dollar lake home on the lake in Vermont that he corruptly obtained, by the way. His wife took $10 million. She embezzled $10 million from a university and got away with it. Now, why don't they give all that money to the poor? Imagine how many kids they could help with their college education. Do you see the Sanders family giving away their money? No, you don't, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Laura in Ohio writes, while it would be nice if the Federal Reserve was disbanded, yes, it would, Laura, a strong pick from Trump could really turn things around despite the hysteria. Herman Cain seems like a decent choice, but now there are rumors he might drop from the running. Is there anyone else who could rein in the Fed? Well, the Fed is so out of control, Laura, that I agree with you. It should be eliminated, and a new organization should be put into place to do just what the Fed is supposed to do, which is money injection and interest rates, and that's it, and get out of the business of managing the economy. Herman Cain's a good choice. I don't know if he has quite the depth of background. He is a restaurateur. He was head of the Restaurant Association. He's got a long background in business, which is a good thing. I don't know. You might need an economist for that job. I'm sure Trump is looking at a range of people. I wish Herman Cain would not have dropped out, but I'm sure the president will find somebody. Now, make sure to hit the like button, and on YouTube, click the bell. Most importantly, go to BehindTheCurtainRadio.com. Get that podcast. Get it right now. Chris in Virginia. We got another repeat. Oh, by the way, welcome to Jesus, to Dan, We got Fred, we got Mary, and we got Sue. Welcome to all of you joining us on Facebook. Chris in Virginia writes, recently an immigrant man in Maryland was beaten for wearing a MAGA hat. There was also an attempt to shoot chemicals at a conservative speaker during a speech at the University of Missouri. And yet Democrats are the ones constantly blaming us for indictment. How can we stop this? How do we stop this violence against conservatives? Well, you correctly point out, Chris, the double standard in the media. The media isn't interested in violence against us. Let me give you a bigger example. I was shot 3 times. The nut fired 7 rifle shots, barely had coverage, had some local coverage. You would think it would have had massive coverage. It didn't. It didn't. It was even connected with the Seth Rich murder investigation. But you're quite right. The double standard is alive and real. They're not interested in what they do to conservatives. It's a shame. Amanda in California, I'm worried that President Trump, despite the booming economy, is letting his supporters down. He is in some ways, Amanda. He vetoed a resolution to end U.S. involvement in Yemen. He's allowed insane government spending to continue, and his tariffs are starting to hurt trade. Now he's giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Tiger Woods. And Amanda, there's one important thing you didn't mention. You lay out the list well, but he did not build 1 square mile of the wall. Not 1 mile of the wall's been built. You know, supposedly he's taken money. Supposedly there's money taken from FEMA and DOD and Army Corps. There's all this fighting over the budget. How much of the wall has been built? I will say it. I have said it before, and I will say it again. I am giving strong consideration to entering the GOP race for president if I don't see at least some of the wall, some substantial portion of the wall completed by year's end. I may do just that to hold the president to his commitments. And remember, it's not MAGA. Make America great again. America's already great. Make America safe again. It's not MAGA, it's MASA. We'll see you next time on Behind the Curtain.